Hi guys, I'm Katie Roome from periapspress.com, where I review indie sci-fi and fantasy books. Press live, press my video intro, and that's when StreamYard's like, actually, wait a minute, you should upgrade. So that's why there was a little bit of blank space at the beginning. I apologize. And I couldn't play my intro. So I've got to figure out that because I'm not upgrading. Welcome. I am back after a long hiatus. I went on vacation, a long vacation. It was really, really nice. Uh, I won't share any pictures with you guys, but it was a beach vacation, and it was just beautiful, gorgeous weather. Couldn't ask for better. Kids had a blast. We went with with their grandparents, with my parents. So very, very good. And I'm back now, and I'm going to get into streaming. I also have a lot of other great content planned for you guys, all assuming baby cooperation. Hi to Michael Kane in the chat. Good to see you. So, while I was gone, the Orc City meme happened. And Katie, why does that matter? Well, it's because of this book by John A. Douglas. The meme was inspired first by people taking the mickey out of the very first chapter. And why does this matter to me? Like a week and a half, 2 weeks later? Well, because this little quote here saying that The Black Crown is a masterpiece of epic fantasy, that's me, Katie Roome, Periapsis Press. So I want to talk about this. I want to talk about some of the criticisms and why I said it was a masterpiece. Do I stand by that? And why you guys can trust me as a reviewer, despite plenty of people, again, taking the mickey out of it. I'm going to try not to put my foot in my mouth through this, just because John Douglas is a mutual and a friend, and he's also wrong on several occasions. I do not feel the need to stand up for him. He is a adult in the online space. He knows how it works, and he pokes the bear on purpose. So I don't need to defend his opinions about stuff. And I also don't feel the need to like pretend for whatever reason that because he and I are friends, that all of his opinions are good and are ones that I agree with. I think I said that well. Okay. Michael Caine says awkward. Maybe I didn't say it very well. First, this live stream is part of my ongoing series called The Signal, where I talk about different topics that are related to indie, specifically sci-fi and fantasy books, and are also relevant to readers in particular. So I'm not going to be doing anything that is going to be solely focused on other indie writers and like talking about how to write a paragraph or anything like that. Just so you guys know. What I am going to do is I'm going to add my slides, and I'm going to talk first about some news in the indie sphere, as well as my most recent review, and then a few. I think that's the only two things that I have, and then we'll jump into today's topic. 2 book releases since I last streamed. Tower of Cortical by Kalina Radcliffe. She is the author of the Elmness Chronicles, which is a sort of dark fantasy dystopian vibes, but more on the fantasy side of fantasy dystopia, if that makes sense. So I reviewed the first one in that series. Definitely recommend her work, even though I haven't personally read Tower of Cortical yet. I recommend her stuff. And then Lifebinder, released today by Blake Carpenter. He wrote Deathbringer, which I absolutely recommend. Again, dark fantasy. This one is a bit darker. We got necromancy and stuff like that. Real cool stuff. So have definitely been looking forward to the release of this book. And as I sat down like 15 minutes ago, realized that I have been reading the title wrong this entire time, and I had put in my post where I posted the excerpt from this that he shared with us, I had written Lifebringer, and because Deathbringer, and then so I fixed that real quick. I apologize, Blake. It's totally my bad. So yeah, definitely recommend you guys check out both of these titles. And of course, you can see on my website if they appeal to you through the excerpt that they shared with me. I'm really excited to be able to share that with you. We are still doing a book club. Again, it's been a long break. We are still reading Shoot the Devil. I have a couple videos already recorded that I'm going to be editing and then posting. So I can't remember which one we're on right now. I apologize. So Michael Caine says also awkward. This is going great. I get back into the swing of things here. If you would like to participate or in this or future book clubs, just reach out to me. Obviously, you can read along with us and join in on YouTube. Otherwise, I can invite you to my Discord and you can match schedules with us and actually participate in the video. The Haunt on the Island of Esmer by Justin A.W. Blair. I loved this book. I'm so excited to tell you guys about it. Very, very unique thing that is difficult to sell in trad pub mindset. Absolutely perfect for indie. So fantasy horror, I'll just read my thing. A suspenseful fantasy horror novel featuring veteran adventurers teetering on the edge of madness, a demon-riddled dungeon, and a boy who wants to become a knight. The first book in the series is a sanity-twisting dungeon crawl. Really good. I will say that it is not a part of a series in such a way that it can't stand alone as a really good read. Really, really interesting things happen. Some people I've seen on Amazon reviews had like compared it to like The Black Company. It captures a very overlapping sort of subgenres of fantasy, D&D type of dungeon crawl feel, but also Lovecraftian horror, but also this sort of military-esque all while being so dark and gritty and interesting without being like grinding the characters down to dust and just sort of destroying them. Instead, it builds them up into these heroic characters. It's just great. Very, very excited. Free Narnian, thank you so much for coming. I would love to be back in such a way where I was going to be here every single week consistently. It's just with kids, it's so hard. I get to the end of Monday and I'm not doing anything different than I was doing on Saturday or Sunday, but I just feel exhausted. But I am going to try. I'm going to try. And I have content planned. I have ideas of things to talk about. And I have a lot of fun stuff planned. So, is the Orc City book a masterpiece? I will. This is how I found out about stuff. Michael Caine, oh, for crying out loud, these stupid ads, is in my Discord and alerted us to what was going on. And actually, I think he posted the link to this, and this is how I found out about stuff that's going on. Because I swore off Twitter. I was like, I'm not going to go on Twitter. I'm going to be on vacation. And I'm glad that I did it, but I enjoy being on Twitter and interacting with people that I consider friends, so it really felt like coming back to school or something. When you see all of your friends again. It was great coming back. Okay. So John Douglas had a tweet, as he does, and the tweet prompted Cappy Baroness to post the opening chapters of his book in which he describes the aftermath of an orc war. And several internet users mocked Douglas's writing for using simple fantasy tropes where orcs fight elves, highlighting lines like the orc city's ruin was overseen by the architect of its very destruction, and a line in which an elvish king says there's nothing more reviled than an orc. Jokes about life in Orc City, as well as the war between orcs and elves, began circulating online soon after the tweet went viral. There's his tweet. There's that guy's... Oh, for crying out loud. There we go. That guy's tweet. Some really, really interesting aspects of this. I thought this one was hilarious. I'm from Orc City and I said kill them all. In Orc City, you can be anyone, anything if your body can pay the price. I thought this one was fun. This is... I'm here in the ruins of Orc City. There was another one I think somebody posted on Reddit that I thought was really funny, but it's so fascinating to me how a conversation can move from a inflammatory point to nonsense memes where people don't even know where it came from necessarily. Bum, bum. All right, so that's me right there. And I'll read the whole thing. The Black Crown is a masterpiece of epic fantasy, delivering high-intensity fun without neglecting the expectations of the genre. Interesting about this quote, it comes at the very end of my review where I've talked extensively about all of the things that I liked about the book. So having it pulled and put on the front is fine, right? Like, he is absolutely okay to do that. But it is a little bit out of context, I guess, as far as like why would you call it a masterpiece? Well, I actually just explained in like 1,000 words, but I'm gonna go into stuff here. Michael Caine says, the best tweets were the ones that had completely gone beyond the context of John's novel. Yes, absolutely. The memes just chimping out of the weekend about orcs was hilarious. The memers, sorry. Okay, so recap, which I said at the beginning, but John Douglas does not need me to defend him, and he does not represent my views on many issues. Many issues. But things that we do agree on, he reads and promotes indies. I've discovered stuff through him before, and it has been really great being part of a community that actually reads books and then talks about them. And John does that. He does come out of sort of, I don't know if this is the right way to say this. He has more connections with the booktuber sphere than I do. And so I think he has a little bit of a different vibe from me as far as the things that he likes and the things that he promotes. But we're both doing the same thing. And I do believe he has legitimate skill as a writer. And I'm going to talk about that. Doug Wise, hi. Yeah. The first wave of tweets seemed personal, but after a day or two, the memes were just pretty funny. They were great. It's good stuff. Okay, so here's that tweet with the first paragraph of the prologue. The Orc city smoldered, burned down in the wake of battle, the ground soaked in a knuckle's depth of blood and ash. The savage cries of its defenders now silent and still, as its ruin was overseen by the architect of its very destruction. The Orc wars were finally over. There is nothing more reviled than an orc, said the Elvish king. Okay, I'm going to come back to this. This is where we start. Some of the most common criticisms were about the use of tropes. Boglander said, entire generations of fantasy authors, readers, and fans are permanently trapped in a mental prison where the only way to interact with and understand fantasy is in terms of elves and orcs, literally incapable of conceptualizing a fantasy world where they don't exist. This is really, really fascinating to me. My immediate thought is that this guy isn't the target audience. That's the long and short of it. It's fascinating to me personally because this is the only book I own that has orcs in it. And I have a lot of indie sci-fi and fantasy, and I have a great deal of regular fantasy. So that's really, really interesting to me. Let me rephrase. I also have a very great deal of Tolkien stuff, and that would be the only place where orcs would show up in my library. I think. I'm pretty sure. But they're not really even the same thing. So obviously, and the Forbes article on the meme talks about Tolkien's orcs and, father of modern fantasy, but it's a very different kind of orc than the the green orcs, right? Warhammer, that's what it is. That kind of vibe that's where I'm seeing more inspiration here. Hi, Patrick. Free Narnian says, there's a lot of ideas about fantasy as a genre that are kind of just shadows on the wall. People just say things. Yes. Yep. This is an epic fantasy book. I will just hold it up. It is a chonk. If you are not an epic fantasy reader, then it's not going to appeal to you. If you are the kind of person who likes a different feel and different expectations, and you have different expectations for your entertainment, then obviously you're going to be put off by the tropes that readers of epic fantasy are fine with. In fact, That's why we read them, because we want to see that stuff. Michael Caine points out orcs and elves are useful because most fantasy sci-fi races are narrow facets of humanity. Elves are high and noble, orcs are the base and animalistic. Yeah, it's an incredibly useful dichotomy. I talk about this actually. It's one of my points. And this one. No, it's a few down, I guess. Tingus Pingus. I've done my fair share of poking fun at WikiBrain and writers who focus more on creating lore and world building than actually writing stories in their setting. But after Orc City and the Elvish King, I owe them an apology after seeing an author who just doesn't give a fuck. And then he says, who am I kidding? No, I don't. I'm still going to make fun of them every now and again, but I at least respect them more than someone who publishes soulless dog shit coasting off of tropes and cliches. It's so wrong. Having read the book, it's so wrong. There is a lot of stuff that goes beyond the tropes, and the reason that this gentleman can say that is because he's only read the first paragraph of the prologue. The tone of the prologue, especially in epic fantasy, is not representative of the whole story. It usually is more tropey, history stuff, setting the base of the world that the adventure is going to take place in, kind of sparking off something that's going to be happening. There are more exciting prologues where stuff goes off and it's mysterious and suspenseful and you don't know anything that's going on because you have no context for anything, and then you get ripped out of it and put in chapter 1 and you just keep reading hoping to figure out what's happened. But a lot, especially epic fantasy, it's more about world building than it is about this sort of like being unique. And that's an expectation of the genre. If you don't like that, that's fine, right? Then read a different genre, right? Like, it's no skin off my nose. The Free Narnian says, reading about orcs and elves will always do better than a war between sentient jams and jelly. You can tell I didn't read this ahead of time before I put it up on my screen. That is a habit I've got to break before people start trying to take advantage of me. Hi, Jonathan Sugar. Doug Wise says, I gotta say, too, the highbrow critiques don't land very squarely in the high noon of the romantic cozy cottage. Thank you. Yes, that is very true as well. These guys who were the most critical about the tropes and basically genre signals they're just people who don't read that genre. They're not interested in the genre. Everyone who likes to read about orcs and likes to read about the tensions between orcs and elves and about bloody battles and stuff that happened, right? They're cool with it. It's not a problem for them. Okay, I will put this up. Ethan Van Sciver did I think just 3 parts thread on the basically word choice, sentence level stuff. And he has some valid criticism. I get out of the way right away. Like, John and I don't agree about EVS, just in general. And I don't think that criticism can be in bad faith. I think it's either good or bad criticism. I think this is probably nitpicky criticism. And I will say why in a little bit. But he is correct. This is not a great paragraph. the some of the stuff that he nitpicks about, like the incomplete sentences and stuff, those are stylistic choices. And I cannot speak for John's editors or for John because I wasn't involved in the process at all. But it's highly possible that somebody was like, hey, John, you've got incomplete sentences here. And he was like, I like them, right? It is a vibe. And YA fantasy, which I don't know if I would put this in YA. It has coming of age themes. So could be. But it's a common thing that people do. It's a choppier feel. I don't like it personally. I prefer complete sentences. I also prefer semicolons over comma splices, Michael Caine. But I think that there are some things that could have been done to improve the first paragraph. Okay. Patrick says, my bad faith criticism. This would be better if the orc were on Orc World in a sci-fi novel. Yep. Michael Caine says, I mostly think this sort of public nitpicking is pointless. It didn't add anything to the conversation. Yep. And Free Narnian says, it made people feel very smart, which is exactly why they did it. Okay. So here is the long and short of the criticism about the first paragraph of the prologue of The Black Crown. Epic fantasy readers do not care. By the time they hit that first page, they have heard about it 2 or 3 times, right? Studies show that a customer has to hear about a product several times before they actually act on it. They saw the cover. They read the blurb. And then they tried out the sample probably on Amazon. If they didn't try the sample, then they probably had a stronger recommendation from somebody that they trusted, another booktuber or me or somebody else who said, I liked this and I think you will like it. And then they laid down money on it. So by the time they reach this first paragraph, they are invested. They just haven't invested in the narrative, right? They've invested in the book as a product, which I think is something that is overlooked. A lot of these guys would say something along the lines of like, why do I care, right? Why do I care about this elf guy in this orc city, right? Like, because you've paid money, because you've gone through all of these previous steps and you've hit this first page already confident that this is the kind of thing that would interest you. Second point, epic fantasy readers read the prologue. Or when the author posted on like a review thing on Reddit, I think a year ago, and I came across it while I was doing my research for this to make sure that I knew what Orc City was before I started talking about it. And I happened to glance at it, and his thing was he just skipped the prologue completely. I was like, well, that's not something that you do. So epic fantasy readers do read them, and they expect these elements to appear, right? The Elven King is a descriptor. He gets a name later, right? We expect that too, right? These are just shorthand. Dive right into a world that's vibrant and rich and has lots of moving pieces. It's very, very useful to have these. They use the word tropes, markers of the genre, things that are commonly found, right? They're there for a reason, and it's because the readers want them there. And so they're not going to be like, oh, orcs, the orc city. Ooh, right? No, that's not the yes, blood to my knuckles, right? Like, uh, I'm trying to catch up with the chat here. Calling out the chat now, are we? After Moses Orc City. Nice, yes. Jonathan Sugar says, I don't agree. I remember reading this and wondering why there wasn't more specificity. Michael Caine says that it's such a short passage that I think it's fine. Give it time to zoom in. I think, my last point here, as far as epic fantasy readers don't care, is adults read between 200 to 300 words per minute. Probably that's higher for epic fantasy readers. So probably more whale readers. People who are looking to stay invested for longer are probably whale readers. Read a lot, read fast. They're not spending a lot of time on this paragraph. They're reading right through it real fast. They're picking up on the shorthand and moving on really quick. And I think that's part of why it works for me anyway. Free Narnian says, all that matters is that high elf nonsense continues until morale improves. Michael Caine points out, no one wants to get hit with giant, difficult to pronounce fantasy names in the first paragraph. Okay. Saying that they don't care isn't justification, or perhaps justification isn't the right word. It isn't an excuse or a, like, well, nobody cares, so it doesn't matter, right? Like, I don't mean to say that. Like I already said, the first paragraph has some serious issues. So, why did I call The Black Crown a masterpiece? For me, a story is more than sentence level prose. The bar is low. I would love to see amazing prose and amazing stories and just amazing all the way around. That would be awesome. And maybe that is what the word masterpiece should be reserved for. I called it a masterpiece because of all of the pieces that came together to thrill me by the end. So getting character setting, plot theme, and reader expectations to all play nice together is a major undertaking, and The Black Crown delivers. So that's why I called it a masterpiece. I'm going to dive in a little bit to a specific example where I think shows all of these moving pieces coming together in a very satisfying way. It's going to be spoilery. So if you haven't read the book, which I do recommend, then I encourage you to maybe set this aside and come back to it. If you're watching me live, don't leave, please. Michael Caine says, boo, you were supposed to try to pronounce those names. You know how bad I am at pronouncing normal, perfectly legible, like English or European human names, right? Like from all of the names that we've gone through in our book clubs. I can't do it. Patrick says, Bill the Orc is bad. Sam the Hobbit is okay. I need pronunciation charts next to my fantasy maps and family trees. He also says, just mute and hit the like, share, and subscribe, plus a bell or a knocker for Steam Whistle. Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate you. The reason that I'm doing this is because I did say it was a masterpiece, and I think that as a reviewer, it's important for me to defend that. I want people to take my opinion seriously, And I think that if concerns are raised about a book that I've recommended on my website, then I want to talk about it. So the next thing that I'm going to do, just real quick, before I dive into spoiler stuff, is I'm going to show you guys my website. And so this is it. Reviews. And I will pull up. Oh, there it is. This is the beginning of the review. The Black Crown is a compelling epic fantasy featuring a ghoulish sorcerer, vengeful dragons, found family, and orcs. The first book in the Age of Adventure series is bursting with intrigue and adventure. And then I talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about stuff that I enjoyed. And then I recommend books that I think that if you liked this one, you would like. And that's that. So, just a real quick, if you've read this book and you liked it, you can hit recommend this book at the top of the page. Dun, dun, dun. Anyway, I like and enjoy everything that I post on my website. I do not post about books that I did not enjoy. That is the number one thing for me, is did I enjoy it? I enjoyed The Black Crown. Oh, you guys could not see anything that I just did. Holy cow. Share this tab instead. Okay. When I was talking about recommend this book at the top of the page and made a silly sound, this was what I was looking at. Okay. Let me scroll through again. I talk for a very long time about what I liked about this book. And then at the bottom, if you like this book, I recommend other books that I think you will like. There. That's what I did. Okay. And then I made the sound effect, and it was silly. And I was not sharing my page at all. Okay. Back to what I was saying. Yeah. I don't want you guys to come away thinking that I'm trying to soften in any way my recommendation. I recommend this. And even though I would say, yes, it's got issues, I still think that it's a very good book. I've done editing before. I did not edit this book, and I am not. I'm not actively advertising myself as an editor, but I have experience doing that. And one thing about editing for indies is it's extremely difficult to balance how much you do, how much time you spend polishing a book, and the author's voice and intention, because they're the boss when it comes to indie publishing, right? Which is a bit different for in any other context, right? An editor has a lot more power, I guess, in that relationship. In any sort of publishing capacity. And then, of course, the amount of money. Because the more time that you spend going line by line, the less money per hour, right? So the fact that the prose isn't perfect is something that I can understand how that could happen. I yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay. Oh yeah, there's my thing. I did make a slide for this, but I showed you my website instead, and then didn't share my screen. But okay, I'm going to dive into a trope from The Black Crown. This is going to be a deep dive. This first thing has quotes from my review, and then I'm going to get spoilery. I chose this because it's a trope. It belongs in the genre, and I think the prologue plays into it. Michael King wants to know if anyone else in the chat has read it. Be interested to know as well. Okay, couple quotes from my website recommendation. Rags, the main character, the half-orc, has the most dramatic arc of the heroes, going from naive and pampered boy to a legend who inspires loyalty and greatness in others. I appreciate how his journey brought out his heroic nature rather than grind him down with bitter disappointment. It is satisfying to have this archetype, the chosen one archetype, delivered in so genuine a way, rather than pettily subverted. Rags is not hobbled by the role either, but consistently acts to influence events. So he's an active chosen one. He's not... a lot of people criticize Harry Potter as being a passive chosen one. I would push back very, very strongly on that. But it is a common frustration with the trope. This trope reinforces the character traits that are already present. Spoilers. Okay. So here's how this sort of plays out. A sympathetic source delivers the chosen one exposition, which directs Rags as he begins his quest. It's all very tropey. And plot twist, much, much later, this is the spoiler, it's a lie. Because the lies were so tropey and fit the genre so well, and the expectations of the genre, it made me, as a reader, gloss right over and accept the lies as blindly as Rags did. I knew Rags is naive. And I knew, as the story progressed, that this source was not quite as reliable as we had initially been led to believe. But, it didn't click. It didn't click that it wouldn't be true, because that's the way fantasy worlds work, right? You have this chosen one, and there's prophecy, and then there's the character that fulfills the prophecy, and that's the way fantasy worlds work. And then it doesn't stop there, right? Rags has to overcome the realization that he is not a chosen one, because there isn't one, because it was made up. And he continues on his journey, not with exactly the same goal, but ultimately to make the lie a reality, to become the fulfillment of a prophecy that didn't exist. The chosen one by his own will and effort, as opposed to the dictates of fate, right? Fantastic. Really, really satisfying. Okay. Michael Caine says, this was something talked about in my review. I expect some folks might not like that rug pull, or might not get far enough to see what John was doing with it. Yeah. First 5 or 6 chapters were incredibly tropey and slow until it starts unraveling some of this stuff. I would agree. And it makes good on it, but that didn't make the first few chapters a great experience compared to the rest. Yes, I would agree. Okay. A lot of elements had to come together to make this effect possible, where I was completely taken by surprise, right? The setting is the very first one. The reader has to believe that the world works this way in order to accept the trope at the beginning. The prologue does a lot of the lifting there, I think. The first few chapters as well, they're pretty tropey. I would agree. But that outside sort of not so close to the main character, that outside sort of tropey language of this sort of historic event that happened sets that tone of this is the way the world works. These elements that you recognize as belonging here in a fantasy world, they're here. And then the world had to be developed continuously through the story so that when the rug pull comes, right, you're like, oh, well, duh, right? The world doesn't work like that. This world doesn't work like that. I mean, not like the real world doesn't work like that, but this world doesn't work like that. It's more complex. So, yeah, I'm literally delighted by the way that all of the dominoes lined up here. So, the second element is the characters. First of all, the reader had to be invested in a likable character to make it all the way to the pinch point. So Jonathan Sugar did not make it that way, that far. So got 2/3 of the way through and finally stopped. It was a long time to go without being entertained, sure. I had a good time the whole way through. It was very much my jam. So, but different readers have different experiences. So similar thing with the setting, the character has to be understood as both naive and full of heroic potential in the beginning in order for the reader to believe that this prophecy applies to this guy, right? And then the reader has to believe that he is a heroic leader with charismatic pull by the end of the story, right? I said earlier, Rags is a leader that motivates people, gets people to do stuff. You have to, every step of the story has to convince you from one point where you wholeheartedly buy into the lie that the trope is real, to the point where the lie is revealed. You have to accept that the character has changed from one point to the next, right? And then not to just stop there and break down, but to continue. The characters are particularly rich, I think, in this story. Really, like the found family connections are very, very satisfying if you like that kind of trope. And then, of course, the plot. The adventures that line up to develop these elements must build upon one another naturally, can't feel intrusive, and they have to entertain. So, Jonathan Sugar was not entertained, dropped out. I was thoroughly entertained, and I lasted all the way to this point, and then was just blown away. I loved it. Michael Caine says, I liked Court's farm boy cursing far more than his real world cursing. Yeah. Yep, me too. Court is one of the gems, for sure. Okay, that is all I had. I am particularly pleased when things line up well, dominoes fall just right. That is a experience that I really enjoy. If you want to know more about the themes that I saw, particularly the racial tensions that orcs and elves naturally lean towards, I found them very conservative coded. Perhaps that could just be me reading into it. Uh, um, but some people who were looking at this were suspicious of the vibe as being leftist stuff, and I don't think that that is the way that it plays out in the story. So if you're interested in my thoughts on that, website. This is not the only plot twist. The other one was also very satisfying, and I know that some other readers were less enthusiastic about all of the unveilings. I love that kind of stuff. So, again, my recommendation is based on how much I enjoyed this book and all of the different aspects of the book that I enjoyed. This chosen one trope, I think, is an example of how everything worked together to pull off an effect. I think that that takes a lot of skill as on the part of an author. Could John improve his prose? Yes. Could it be edited more? Always. That's just the way writing works. I think that and again, right, like my intention is not to like put myself in the position of having to argue that the Black Crown is the best thing ever printed on paper, right? I liked it. And that's why I wrote a review and posted it on my website. And I used the word masterpiece. And this is why I used that word. I think there's a difference between reading something very, very quickly and for the enjoyment of reading the story and reading something to edit it, which I would be putting on a completely different hat. And I don't think that hat makes irrelevant my feelings about the story as a reader. Okay. That is all I had to say about this. Thank you guys so much for listening to my self-justification. And I just gonna quick okay. Michael Caine says the dominoes did fall really well in the final act. I agree. Patrick said, I bet he got a boost of sales of this quote-unquote bad publicity. So here, after Moses' final book has a DEI character who voted for a redman Martian dictator. What? Oh, yeah, okay. You guys are talking about after Moses now. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining me, for listening to my recommendation of The Black Crown, and for participating with me in the chat. If you guys have thoughts about this, please comment. Let me know. I would love to have a conversation about this. I will not be scared away by anyone's contrary opinion. I thrive on that kind of thing. Talking about books is my absolute favorite. If you're interested in knowing more, again, I wrote a whole review going over several aspects of the book that I enjoyed. And I have reviewed many, many other books that if you liked this, you will probably also like. And then if epic fantasy is absolutely not your thing, but you still like sci-fi, maybe sword and sorcery, it definitely got stuff for you too. So please check out my website. I have tons of ideas and more content coming, you guys. And I should have time as we get back into our normal schedule and the kids start sleeping again. Thank you again. Okay, I'm going to sign off. You guys have a great one.